I say we get started. First of all, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in this week. My name is Ben Coffey. I'm the Hydro Point Training Manager, and I have with me my co-host, Ben Slick.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks again for spending your half hour with us this morning.
And we are privileged to have a special guest with us from Mid-America Apartments, Alex Klinker.
Hello.
Say hi, Alex.
Hey, everybody.
Alex is joining us on the call, but we will not get to see his face very much. I have hid it in the PowerPoint so you guys can know what he looks like, but he is out in the field today and just on the call. So today we are going to talk about WeatherTRAK rain response. This is a really frequent question that we get through just management, and knowing the details of how WeatherTRAK deals with rain really informs how managers need to go about managing their sites and their systems to stay on top of the changing conditions that come with weather. So Alex is a great guest because he does manage a diverse portfolio of WeatherTRAK. He has a number of different sites in different geographies. He's in fact a user of one of the features that we're going to highlight today called Rainshare. Alex, can you tell us a little bit about how many controllers you manage?
Yeah, so right now, Mid-America has, at least in my portfolio, which is kind of the first one out of the gate to adopt the WeatherTRAK product, we have 20 sites, and that is, I think the last count I had, I just added one, so I need to do the count again, but I think I'm right around 29 controllers.
Nice.
Most of the sites are small and only have one clock. But we have a few larger sites that have multiple clocks, which is where that Rainshare comes into effect.
Yeah, and I've been out on sites with you, and you seem to be much more hands-on the landscape than most water managers that I've experienced. In fact, so much that I thought you were an irrigation guy. You wear it well. So how much interaction do you have with those systems?
So for my position, being I'm what's called a regional landscape director. I am responsible for everything outside the building on our sites. So that's trees, shrubs, sidewalks, recreational stuff, like the whole gambit. If it's not in a building, it's mine. And a big part of that is our landscape, our curb appeal. It's what people see first when they come to look at our properties. So making it look nice is a big part. And, it's funny because for years I've always said to people, if you give me water, I can do anything. And it's amazing when, we get regional visits from our CEO and stuff. And they've said over the years, like, why does this property look better than another property that's a similar size or something? A lot of times I can tell them it's because I have water everywhere here. So I can keep it fresher. I can keep it updated. I can, I'm not as restricted. I'm not scrounging around trying to find a spigot to run a temporary irrigation system off of. So knowing that a properly working system is just a godsend in the business that we work in.
Hey, Alex, so when you talk about your senior leaders when they come to visit sites, what level of value do they associate curb appeal to property value or rent support or asset value?
So we actually, something that we did a long time ago is called weights and positions, where we literally have kind of said of a property's composition, of its amenities, of its landscape, of its ease of getting into and out of all these different things of its team, what are some of the percentages of those things that make up total rent? And still to this day, after over a decade, the single highest percentage is landscape curb appeal, because you can, it's such a big difference. You can literally, if you take all this landscape away from all these buildings, it becomes nothing, and that's one of the hardest parts about that we've tried to kind of adapt to as we get into more the metropolitan areas and we have more high rises, things. It's still incorporating those aspects of landscape to help soften all that big, hard, ugly concrete.
Mm-hmm.
So they put a big dollar amount on it, and we pay a lot of attention. And so.
And detailed management is a huge part of that. So that's awesome.
So how many properties in total are there in the fleet?
let's see. We haven't sold any lately, and we only bought a couple this year. I think we're up at about 318, if I'm not mistaken, same store properties.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And you're owner manager?
We are, yeah. We own everything that we manage.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't fee manage. We don't, if we manage it, we own it.
Yep. So investments you make in these properties have lasting effect to value and to when you reduce operating expenses through water reduction, it just makes you more profitable because rents stay the same, right?
Well, I mean, ideally you grow rents, kind of that, just like everything, the cost of things goes up a little bit. So ideally we're growing rents while hopefully, that's one of the big things why water, it's why I'm able to get money to spend on WeatherTRAK products is because I can usually say with pretty much full guaranteed certainty, just based on experience and on hard numbers that we've got, that if I put in this smart system or if I hydrozone this big hot mess of a zone on a new property we buy or whatever, that I'm going to maintain the value of what it covers. And I'm also going to be able to control the cost where if we aren't saving 30% or more, we're at least holding steady and not growing, and most of the time we don't even get close to growing in the same percentage as the water rates increase.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's awesome. So let me jump into today's subject here. That's the demo. We can't have that first. All right, so for those of you watching at home, we are definitely into the midway point of Rain Pause and Rainshare with Alex Klinker. This is him while we were out on site. He is stealthy about the photos, so I stole one out of my own personal stash. And this was when we were doing a site visit out on one of his properties in Atlanta. And today we're going to be talking about the WeatherTRAK rain features, how WeatherTRAK responds to rain, and how a manager might expect to need to manage in those scenarios. So as part of that, we're going to talk about really the three key factors of WeatherTRAK's rain response. First, the rain sensor, then the climate center rain pause or the WeatherTRAK rain pause, and finally the user rain pause, or when Alex himself can step in and suspend irrigation. Show you those tools. We'll do some demos along the way to show you what those things look like. But first, we want to start by talking about the industry standard rain sensor that I encourage you to attach to your WeatherTRAK system. Now, we don't manufacture a rain sensor ourselves, but it's important for WeatherTRAK's users to remember that the WeatherTRAK information is a once-a-day weather update. It is not streaming weather data. So the controller will be able to say it has rained. It will never be able to say it is raining. And a big part of water management and the perception of good water management is not running your system while it's raining outside. And that's what these rain sensors are designed to provide, is that real-time response to a rain event in your area, right? If it starts raining, these little guys will accumulate water on this little, I would say, nickel-sized surface right here. And as that accumulates enough water in that area, it will interrupt your common wire. It'll just send a signal to stop any irrigation that's happening out on site. So this is really our first line of defense in on-site rain response. Now, one of the cool things that we have done with WeatherTRAK is try and minimize the cost for you and use or leverage that cloud technology that lets all of the controllers communicate across the site. So we've created a feature we call Rainshare, which allows us to attach a standard rain sensor to any controller on site. And then when that sensor activates, it can use the cloud network to shut down all of the other controllers on site. So instead of needing a rain sensor for each individual controller, you'll have one rain sensor put in a representative area, and when that one activates, it can shut down the entire network of controllers that you might be managing. Now, this is exactly the way that Alex manages, right? Alex, you have sites that have multiple properties. And can you describe how you've used Rainshare?
Yeah, I have, if I'm not mistaken, it's 6 sites with multiple controllers. And you know, it really has made it definitely saves you the money. It saves the hassle of the install on multiple areas. It saves you the hassle of, you know, for some of these clocks, trying to figure out, okay, what is within 100 feet that I can actually get it to that won't be a bad place to hang a rain sensor, which is probably one of the biggest things that we all struggle with, is finding a place that isn't just a worthless spot to hang a rain sensor. And it's made it a lot easier too to just kind of to streamline that process. So, you know, that you've just got one reliable one to check when you audit the system. So it's really just cut down on a lot of the minor headaches that make people hate rain sensors. You know, they're super useful. They're one of our first lines of water savings, and you know, but you got to use them right, and just take some of the kinks out.
And I will echo that 100%. What I see in the industry when I go inspect installations is rain sensors that have been installed improperly and are virtually worthless, really. Like if you see what a good placement of these sensors looks like, exposed to the sky and all of that. I've found them under trees, under awnings. One time I actually found one in the area of irrigation. So every night when it would get to station 7, it would wet down the rain sensor and interrupt the rest of the irrigation schedule. So there is an art and a science to installing these for sure, and maintaining them. Especially the reason I think that Rainshare is so important is for properties like apartment complexes or schools or city parks, that these little transmitters are just magnets for vandalization. So if we can minimize the number of parts that kids can throw rocks at and affect your irrigation system, I think it's a good thing. So real quick, I just want to walk through a demonstration on how to set Rainshare up in your system. Oops, close the wrong thing. Finish the PowerPoint, go to WeatherTRAK.net. Okay, here we are on WeatherTRAK.net, and the tour of Rainshare starts by going to your Sites tab and your Managed Site page. Here on the Managed Site page, if we edit the site details, we can scroll down and see down at the bottom, we've got this Rainshare option. And the only thing you have to do is set up the controller that has the rain sensor attached and let the cloud know that this is the one that you want to listen to. When we get a rain sensor pause on this controller, share it across all the other ones. So once you get your sensor wired in, you select the controller that you've wired that sensor into, and that's all there is. And then of course hit save, but that's all there is to setting up the Rainshare. Alex, I know you've done this. Does that match your use case? Have you, is that easy enough for you to find and access on your sites?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, one of the great things, the things that I've liked the most about WeatherTRAK is I forgot, because I think I had a couple months between doing one or the other, and just a quick search and the article pops up in WeatherTRAK University, and you're back going again. And it's really simple, and it's one of those features that it's easy to overlook, but it's just such a help. Yeah.
A nice plug there for the knowledge-based articles.
Oh, I love that thing, and I love the feasibility in the field. I've literally had several of my vendors tell me that their tech was able to troubleshoot something, click on a YouTube video, and it saved them a trip. And if you save trips, that's time, and time is everything.
So we do have a question about this.
Okay.
Cool technology, but how do you determine which controller gets the rain sensor? And can you assign a portion of the controller on the site to communicate with the rain sensor while others on the entire site do not get affected by the rain sensor? I'll let you guys answer that, and I'll color it with my thoughts, but let's go with the 2 experts first.
Okay, Alex, do you have any comment on that?
So the way that we picked it essentially came down to looking at a site, saying, okay, I got 3 controllers. No, and you usually know your site. Sometimes you don't if it's a new site, but if you do know your site, you can look and see which one's going to have the most feasible rain sensor installation location anyways, where it's going to be the easiest to get to, what's going to be the best to keep it from, like Ben said, getting vandalized or stolen or hit by irrigation, you know, and it just lets you, instead of having to find 3 potentially semi-impossible situations, it just lets you narrow it down. So that's how we picked. In 2 of the cases, we were able to actually just take down the other rain sensors that were in somewhat problematic areas and weren't always super useful and helpful. We were able to just use the one on that we decided to be the main controller. So that's kind of how we went about it.
Yeah, I'd build on that by saying just knowing the installation description or the installation instructions for those devices, right? There's usually a line of sight requirement, a certain distance from the controller requirement. So finding that ideal location that meets all of your vandalization and exposure requirements and finding the nearest controller to that is something that I recommend. And then on the second part of that question, can it be applied to just a section of the controller? We'll learn a little bit later about how you can elect to override the rain information on a station-by-station basis on those station program settings. So I'll talk about the usable rainfall setting and how we can use that to recognize, even if the controller gets paused, this station or that station needs to irrigate anyway.
One last topic before we move on to the rain pause features. If a customer has 1 rain sensor and there's 5 controllers on the site and they pick it as their Rainshare service, can they also add a physical rain sensor to another controller that's in a problematic area that can act independently of Rainshare?
It would act in addition to Rainshare. So you apply the Rainshare controller to the whole site, but if you have another rain sensor plugged into a controller, it will still act as the rain sensor for that controller alone as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, so enough about Rainshare. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, I did that twice. Close you, back to the PowerPoint. All right, here we go. So next we want to talk about the Climate Center rain pause. Again, the rain sensor is designed for the on-site response, right, when it's raining. But WeatherTRAK has a host of features surrounding the ability to suspend your irrigation based on the local rainfall. It's just not in real time. It's not in the middle of your irrigation. It's a once-a-day weather update. Now, the most common question about this is it part of the ET scenario? Is it part of that ET number that's getting sent? And the answer is no. When I think about ET, we're documenting all of the ways that water evaporates from the site, right? How wind takes that water out of the site. And rainfall is an addition to that equation, and it doesn't really fit. Rainfall is a separate thing that we monitor. So every day, every controller will get an ET number, but we send out the rain signal as a separate signal only to those controllers that meet the requirements. So let's talk about what those requirements are, right? We sent out this nice little Facebook tip this week in preparation for this session that says that only after 1/8 of an inch of usable rainfall will the Climate Center rain pause kick in. Now, this is really important because usable rainfall is different than total rainfall. What WeatherTRAK is measuring is not only how much water fell in a rainstorm, but the duration of that rain event and equal distribution. Lots of different things go into what we consider usable rainfall. So once we accumulate 1/8 of an inch of usable rainfall, you'll see the Climate Center send out a rain pause. And depending on how much usable rainfall you got, that rain pause can range from a 2-day shutdown to a 14-day shutdown. Now, a couple of details surrounding that, right? First of all, that is recalculated every day. So if you get a 14-day shutdown based on 2 inches of rain yesterday, know that WeatherTRAK is still watching the weather, and it's going to recalculate that number. So you might see it at 14-day pause on day 1, but on day 2 it might have ticked down a couple of days. It might go from 14 down to 10 days. In 100-degree heat, it could go from 14 days down to 3 days, right? So it's recalculated to make sure we're staying on top of those ever-changing conditions. Also, the rainfall. Go ahead.
We got a quick question here. What's the typical delay on WeatherTRAK controllers receiving a rain pause signal from our climate center? Is it a 1 to 2 hour? Is it 8 hours? I mean, the goal of the question is to help them determine cost effectiveness of installing a physical sensor versus letting the super cool WeatherTRAK servers do their thing for them.
Great question. So just like the ET signal, it is sent out once a day, and depending on kind of the whole back-end network of collecting that data, figuring out the usable rainfall, and the time that we kind of put the stop on that, it can affect when you get that information, right? So you could see it depend if the rain signal is sent out starting at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And that's in every time zone, it starts at 4 p.m. And so depending on when that rainfall hits and when we kind of stop the data collection to collect it and send it out, you might see an earlier in the day storm be affected on that 4 p.m. signal, or it might push to the next day on that 4 p.m. signal, depending on how that rain is falling and the timing of all of those other factors involved. Does that answer your question?
Follow-up question to that, Ben, is when rain pause is set by the user for a day, is that a 24-hour until midnight day?
That's exactly my next point here. Is this rain pause is different with WeatherTRAK than I've seen on other controllers. It is not a 24-hour pause per se. It counts down at the program A start time. So a 2-day rain pause will, as soon as the controller gets that pause, it will suspend all scheduled irrigation that's happening. Manual irrigation is separate, so it won't interrupt you testing the system at all, but it'll cancel all of your schedules. And then at the program A start time, that 2-day rain pause will count down to a 1-day rain pause, right? So we'll suspend all of the irrigation for that second day. Then when program A start time comes around again, the 1-day pause will tick down to a 0-day pause and irrigation will resume. So it's not exactly 24 hours. It's always surrounding that program A start time.
A couple of other questions that have come in around control. So does the WeatherTRAK software ever ignore a user set rain pause and water anyway? So can a climate center rain pause override a user, or vice versa? Can a user override a climate center rain pause?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little more detail when we talk about the user pause, but any pause on the control, they work in tandem, right? So while the climate center rain pause does recalculate, if you send in on top of that a user rain pause, the user rain pause does not recalculate. So any pauses, all pauses will be adhered to. So you can absolutely step in and say, I see WeatherTRAK has a 2-day pause and I want to pause for 4 days. The controller will hold both of those pauses for you.
Another nuanced question here. Is there a way to override my rain sensor through the software in the event it's raining when I'm performing maintenance on my system?
Again, the rain sensor, all of these pauses will not affect manual operation. So it shouldn't affect your testing. It only affects the scheduled irrigation.
If it's raining and the rain sensor sends an interrupt to common to the control, how does someone override that?
It's different on WeatherTRAK than it is on other controllers. With WeatherTRAK, we use that as a data port. It's not a direct common interrupt as it is on other controllers. It interrupts a connection in the controller that brings up the rain pause. So we listen to the same sensor, but it's not actually directly interrupting your common. It's just a piece of the data that we're managing.
All right, and last question that's in, Ben, I know you're going to address this coming up. Is there a capability for the system to pre-suspend in anticipation of a future rainfall event?
Absolutely. And I will show you that on the user pause. Absolutely. That's where the user pause comes into play. So the one last point I have before we move on about Climate Center rain pause is some of my users don't love this. They feel like they want to manage this without that feature, so it can be disabled. If you don't understand or don't trust the Climate Center rain pause, as some of my more detailed water managers just choose to keep that on themselves, this is something that you can shut off in the controller or on the line, so that the Climate Center rain pauses don't affect your scheduled irrigation. All right.
One more question on usable rainfall. So usable rainfall is adjusted based on ET on the subsequent days. I think the question really goes to how do you determine usable rainfall by station? And this is more of a programming thing based on physical attributes of the station than it is about amending ET to accumulated rainfall, but also a best guide to select a % of usable rainfall when setting station information.
Let me hold that question until I talk about usable rainfall after the user pause.
Right.
That's coming at you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about user rain pause. Now, this is absolutely where management steps in. This is the manager tools. So remember, WeatherTRAK is never going to predict weather information, and it is only acting on reported data. So you'll never see WeatherTRAK pause your irrigation because there's rain in the forecast. And we can, as managers, step in and say, I know it's going to rain tomorrow. I want to suspend my irrigation and use that rainwater. And WeatherTRAK's just not going to do that for you because there's so many mysteries surrounding predicting weather information that it's not scientific enough for our uses. So we have what we call user rain pause that can be accessed at the controller, online at weathertrak.net, or through the app. What we're seeing here is WeatherTRAK mobile. If you go to your controllers page, you see right the same place you find your alerts, you find your pause. And you just click on that pause and send a rain pause to the controller. That can range from 1 to 200 days. Now, this is a little bit tricky. The rule still applies here that pause will expire at the program A start time. So if you send a 1-day rain pause, a 1-day user rain pause, it will go out, it will in real time shut down all of your scheduled irrigation and prevent any more scheduled irrigation from happening until the next program A start time. At that next program A start time, it goes from 1-day pause down to 0-day pause. And at program A start time, irrigation will resume.
So Alex, how do you use this?
For the user rain pause, I hate to say it, I don't have to use it that often because between an on-site rain center and WeatherTRAK's climate one, it's rare that one gets missed. We haven't really had it often enough where I'm having to go, it's just I don't like the accuracy of the WeatherTRAK or my on-site one. So I think we've only had to use it, I think I've used it twice, and both times were when a local rain sensor was down. So it's a nice feature to have, but I see it more useful if you have not invested in a rain sensor connected to the clock on site.
So we've had some, in the last couple of years, extreme weather patterns, hurricanes, large storm events. Do you ever look at those NOAA forecasts or see these 7 to 14 day events and proactively pause controls based on that?
So I grew up in the nursery business, and which means that, a lot of hand watering, a lot of, running valves as needed by, what's growing in the fields and things like that. And one of my bosses taught me a long time ago. He had this phrase he loved. He said, God doesn't always water, but landscapers do. And because, like, a great example is, the hurricanes that occurred last year. We have properties in Columbia and South Carolina. they were supposed to get hammered. I mean, it was, if you went on spaghetti models or any of those other, you know, NOAA or any of those folks, and looked at the forecast, they were going to get hammered. But because, you know, the system is responsive enough, and with having that on-site backup, you know, and having it set right, knowing it's in a good location, that it's going to get accurate data, you know, we didn't feel that need to go in and have to use the rain pause. And I'm glad I didn't, because one of the sites got 0 rain, and the other site got enough rain that the rain sensor at the clock only shut it off for a day. You know, because again, if your zones are programmed right, if your soil is right, if all those things are programmed right, you know, then good data in, good data out. So again, we've only really had to use it on when it's there's another time we used it when you're first starting to tweak and really get your system dialed in. You know, we've had some spots where we and this is another great feature in the WeatherTRAK, is that being able to figure out where your rotors are on a slope and stuff like that, so it calculates better. But before we figured that out, we had some wet areas. So being able to go in and say, you know, just skipping one day for you know, a mowing service wasn't enough. We were able to skip a couple. But it's again, we just found that with the Rainshare and having an accurate one on site, very rarely need to use it.
That's awesome. So what we're looking at right now is some of the tools on the manage page that you would be using to predict that weather, right? We've recently added this weather forecast, so you as a manager can see kind of what the weather might look like in the upcoming days. And if you're on this page, you can send your controller a rain pause, right? I see that it's going to rain Saturday and Sunday. I don't want this thing to come on until Monday or Tuesday. I can send it a 5 or 6 day rain pause and save yourself all of that irrigation. Another way that we could use it on multiple controllers is if I go over here to the controllers page, and I want to select multiple controllers, I can send multiple controllers a rain pause by using the check marks over here. I can select one at a time or all together, and then send all of my controllers a rain pause. This is something that can be a great time saving if you have a big site that has a lot of controllers. On my Fort Carson site, it used to take them 40 man hours to go and turn all of their controllers off when it rained and then turn them all back on. And now they can do that in just a matter of minutes. So some great tools to use here in terms of just getting those things programmed to the controller. And then last, we want to get back to that. I know we're running thin on time, but I promised this, so I'm going to go there. With all 3 pauses, there's 2 things that I want you to know about all 3 pauses. First of all, because rain is not part of the ET equation, one of the things that we do is when a controller is paused in either rain sensor, user rain pause, or climate center rain pause, that suspends the depletion for those stations. So they don't continue to get thirstier and thirstier. As soon as the pause is lifted, they will continue to accumulate depletion and irrigate when they get to 50% maximum allowable depletion. So that's the way that we kind of kick out the days that ET is overridden by rain. And then, of course, we have already touched on the fact that we can override this information on a station-by-station basis. On our station programming, we have a feature called usable rainfall that is applied by station. And at 100%, you're saying, I want this this station to use 100% of the rain information that it has. So if any pause is sent to that controller, it will suspend irrigation for that station. Now, if we switch that to none, then it says, even if it rains, I want this station to irrigate anyway. So if you have stations that are high priority, gardens, or really more specifically, aren't going to get that rain, if you've got stations that are in a greenhouse or under an underpass, you can use that usable rainfall feature to say, hey, even if the rain sensor kicks on, I want this station to water anyway. This is most commonly used in plant establishment. Like you got those sod zones that rain or shine you want to water, go ahead and make sure that usable rainfall is set to none. Specifically to your question earlier, Mr. Slick, the levels of usable rainfall, it's my understanding that that was an enhancement that went away. It used to represent canopies, right? It was designed to represent you were only getting a certain amount of the rain. But I believe that now it's all or nothing. It's either 100% or anything less than that. If you go in and program to 50%, it just recognizes that as none. Okay, so that is it for my PowerPoint stuff. Let's go back and make sure we don't have any questions, first of all.
We've cleared those out. Great job. Very
Awesome.
Robust set of questions today on this topic. So
that's great.
People
Alex
like rain.
Klinker, I have one last question for you that I ask everybody at the end of the call. What does WeatherTRAK save you?
Time, headaches, stress, money. So I'll give you a fun one because I know this is one that you guys like, and it's one we love too. I'm only allowed to spend money if I guarantee my company I'm gonna save it. You know, return on investment. My first demo site we did in late 2017, really late 2017, pretty much by the time we turned it off. So 2018, 2019 were our real numbers. In 2017, this is in an area that water per gallon is stupidly expensive here in Atlanta. We spent $20,000, all right, on roughly that year in 2017. Last year in 2019, we spent $5.
Whoa.
Part of it was that we put on it was a poorly built system. It was inexpensive parts were used. The main line was dirt cheap. I think I don't know where they sourced it from, but it was made from Swiss cheese. We put on the full system. We put on, you know, a WeatherTRAK controller. We put on the flow. You know, we were able to work that. I wanted all the bells and whistles, and all the bells and whistles paid for themselves in like 10 minutes. So, yeah. So that's when we pulled the bolt. We pulled the trigger and went ahead and started putting them on, you know, as we can over all of my Atlanta sites. I'm going to be converting Greenville soon. I'll be converting Columbia. Our other portfolios are looking at the feasibility for their sites. So my vendors, for the most part, the ones that know irrigation, love it because it saves them a ton of time. You know, they can get a call from a mow crew and say, hey, it's real wet over here behind building 4. Well, hold on a second. Let me fire that zone, you know, and the irrigation tech can be somewhere else, you know, and I love it because some of the features in the app, you know, we no longer lose the data. I've got guys mapping out systems in the app, you know, so that they can, oh, we found a valve. Let's go ahead and pin this geolocation so that when that irrigation tech walks off, gets hit by a meteorite or whatever it might be, gets more money to go hang drywall, we don't lose all the data that was in his head. So, I mean, I could probably go for a long time. It's by far the best system I've worked with.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. All right, so with that, we are out of time. I'm excited to have you join us for next week's edition where we continue to build on adjusting your stations in auto mode. Last time we talked about adjusting your run times. Next week, we'll have a great guest, Brady Pitcher from Sprinkler Supply. We'll talk about adjusting your irrigation frequency. So not how much we water when it does water, but how often your system prompts irrigation on those stations and the settings surrounding determining that for your station. So excited to have you come back next week and join us in the conversation. In the meantime, my name is Ben Coffey. Thanks for joining us here this week. And thanks to Alex for making time to lend us his perspective.
My pleasure.
There aren't enough Bens in the world. I'm Ben Slick. Thank you very much. It's appreciate talking to you guys today. Thanks for all your great questions. You make this really fun for us to do. So appreciate you.
Absolutely. And you want to take us out, Alex?
Thank y'all. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.